Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, rappers, exterminators, and god killers. We're talking weird games with comedian Greg Smith. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers. Oh boy. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. How's it going, Mark?
It's going great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any problem saying your own name?
No, because mine's like pretty vanilla, like as boring as it can get.
Yeah, but my name is my name. Like, I feel like I can't
I mean, but
have a hard time saying my
it
own
could be a
name.
little bit of a tongue twister. I think that's acceptable. But like if I tripped over my name, Mark Mitchell,
Yeah,
like
you're
that'd
right.
be embarrassing.
You're right. You have an embarrassing name. You're right. Well, we've got a good long conversation with our buddy Greg coming up here. Greg's super funny and super talented, and we had a really nice time chatting with him about weirdo games. So we won't waste too much of your time. However, we do need to waste some time. First of all, borrow my copy of Sonic Forces.
Just
on
do it
Nintendo.
already.
Just do it. Just write me an email and say, hey, send that thing to me. I'll do it. You just need to send an email to Nintendo Cartridge Society
at gmail.com. It costs you nothing.
Big O goose egg represents a 0. You don't have to actually send me a goose egg. Also, we need your help. We're going to be talking about The Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time, specifically the dungeons and how we will rank them. But hey, Mark and I are dummies. We can't remember everything about these dungeons. Mark, what is the second dungeon?
Ugh.
It's Death Mountain. I'm sorry I asked you one that I knew the answer to. There are going to be questions that we do not have the answers to, even when we search our souls good and deep. So if you could send in any of your impressions, what are your favorite dungeons? What are your least favorite dungeons? What's your ranking? What are some bosses we shouldn't overlook? Whatever. Send that to Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com and, be a part of the show that way. All right, Mark, I think without further ado, should we get into our fun conversation with Greg?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Today on the show, we have got our good friend, comedian, musician extraordinaire, Greg Smith. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Patrick. Hey, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Nintendo, time to play it.
Yeah.
That's the title, right?
The name of the show is now Nintendo Time to Play It, and Greg is on it. Greg on it, time to play it.
Ooh.
Every
Every time I am a guest on an episode, I make them change the title.
single, every show that you're ever on?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Greg, do you feel that's presumptuous?
How do you mean? I guess is my response.
Jeez, because, people have their own ways of presenting their own shows, and then you come on, and they've got this name already.
Right.
I think you see where I'm going.
I
I think you know why it's presumptuous.
Maybe I'm being a little obstinate.
Greg, welcome to Nintendo. Let's talk about it. We are going to discuss some weird games today. Because I sent a text over to Greg to say, hey, what would you like to talk about on the show? And you threw down 2 pretty vanilla suggestions, right?
Oh, wow.
Oh, I don't mean to diss you here.
I understand that, but you are dissing the flavor of vanilla for sure. This is a good flavor.
I believe it is among the finest, like the Bare Naked Ladies say. But the third suggestion that you gave was like a weirdo game.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell me what that game was, and we can talk about it.
Yeah. This game means so much to me. Doing kind of researching it and getting it back in my bones, I forgot how much I love this game. The game is called Def Jam Fight for New York. Have either of you played this game?
No.
I have not. So what platform is this on?
I played it on the Nintendo GameCube,
–
but it was also released for PlayStation 2 and Xbox.
Okay.
So it's not a Nintendo exclusive, but it is how I experienced it on the Nintendo GameCube.
Legit. It counts as a Nintendo game.
Yeah, let's talk about it. as the name
the
of
title of the
the title
show.
of the show now is.
So what is this game?
Gosh, what isn't this game? Def Jam Fight for New York is a fighting wrestling game infused with hip hop culture and infused with a very, very I don't want to say it's well written, but it's very written, a very written story mode. The writing in this game, the storyline in this game, like hits you like a ton of bricks in a way that it feels like the kind of movies it's trying to emulate. Your Juices, your Boys in the Hoods,
Okay.
New Jack City, stuff like that. It feels like a classic sort of hip hop influenced movie
But
as a video game.
but the game itself is like a one-on-one fighter.
Yeah. So you can also do like it's kind of like WCW NWO Revenge for the
Sure.
Nintendo 64. So you can do like up to 4 people in a match, 2-on-2. You can do a battle royale. You can grab stuff from the audience as weapons, but you literally play as rappers.
That's so cool.
Like real
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. There are so many real people in this game. You can play as Ludacris. You can play as Method Man and Redman. You can play as Snoop Dogg, although Snoop Dogg plays a character called Crow. So you're playing Crow, but he's obviously just Snoop Dogg.
Ooh,
So there are some real rappers and then
Mhm.
some rappers playing characters within the narrative.
So was that like because of licensing issues that they wanted some people to like sign on and be part of this that were like, no, I like Snoop Dogg's like no, but they were like, we can just do someone called Crow who's like Snoop.
No, it's not Snoop Dogg voices Crow.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
he voices Crow. He's obviously like the motion capture likeness of Crow. They just really wanted this storyline with an antagonist named Crow,
Yeah.
voiced by Snoop Dogg. And yet, Ludacris, I think, just plays himself within the narrative. So some of it gets a little sweaty. There are also characters.
Sure. So it's like when you're watching a Curb Your Enthusiasm and
Yeah.
you see comedians on it and you're like, oh, this person is obviously playing themselves, and you're like, oh no, he's the waiter, right? If you
Yeah.
had this experience,
Yeah, definitely.
and you're like, oh, the rest of these comedians get to be comedians.
So is it like Mortal Kombat where like the story mode you can play as any one of these like rappers making your way through?
So the story mode, you're actually playing an anonymous hero. It has a pretty in-depth create your own character kind of system. I think the person I created, there are 6 fighting styles in the game. I wonder if I can remember them all. There's street fighting, there's kickboxing, there's wrestling. I'm not going to remember the other ones. But there's like different fighting styles, different looks. If you buy more expensive clothing and more expensive jewelry, your stats go up. So, and you visit this guy called Jacob the Jeweler, who in the hip hop culture is a real life jeweler that rappers all go visit, and he voices himself. It's so detailed, and it was so perfect for a hip hop / video game lover like me. And the gameplay itself is so fun. I played this game so much with all of my friends. We stayed up so late beating the garbage out of each other as these rappers in these street fights. God, I just love this game.
I guess my question was going to be like, what drew you to this game in the first place? But I think it's obvious, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm a big old hip hop.
You're a big old hip hop head.
Yeah, and I played the second game in the Def Jam fighting game series. The first one was called Def Jam Vendetta, which was okay.
Wait, the first one is called Vendetta?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's I see what you're saying. That's right. Def Jam Vendetta was okay. There were less characters. The fighting system was a little less complicated in a good way. It was a little too oversimple.
Yeah, sure.
And they took everything about that game and made it objectively better, including, you mentioned licensing before. This game has such a banging soundtrack.
Yeah.
It has like at least 30, if not more, hip-hop songs underscoring all of this carnage and mayhem. You just feel so cool playing this game. I want to play it right now.
Who developed it? Like, or who published it?
EA, I think, published it.
And is the series dead now, or does it?
It is. They put out one more game in the series called Def Jam Icon. I have no idea why they did this. They made it, I guess it's kind of cool in theory. They made it like a Parappa the Rapper fighting game. So it was still fighting, but all of the moves you had to like hit in rhythm.
Oh,
with
interesting.
The music, and it was very confusing, and I think it was kind of buggy. I played it for like a day, and I sold it immediately. It was really bad and very disappointing, and then it was done.
Do you think any hope of the series coming back ever?
This is an interesting question to me because hip hop culture, like a lot of pop culture right now, it's not as monolithic. It's not as centralized. It's very splintered. So like, it would be very fun for me personally to like develop a new hip hop fighting game that has a bunch of weird pockets and subgenres that didn't exist at the time. But like, I don't know if like centering a game around Snoop Dogg being a villain means the same now as it did then.
Yeah, sure. It doesn't have the. I mean, unless you did it as like a throwback.
That's true.
But I mean, that's taking a weird concept and like adding another layer of weird to it, or like another layer of concept to it.
Definitely.
So maybe that wouldn't work.
So this kind of remind me of that. I guess only because a rapper was involved. Do you remember this game that I don't think ever came out, and it was going to be for like the PS3 and the 360, where it was 50 Cent in
Bulletproof was it called, right?
Blood and Sand, right?
Blood and Sand, is that what it was called?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like in.
No, that game came out, and I think it was like his second or third game.
Yeah, because there was another game I think called Bulletproof.
Is this one where he's like in Afghanistan or wherever?
That's Blood and Sand. Yeah.
That's a real. That's
Yeah.
Okay, so that did come out.
And they're like traveling around in jeeps trying to like find his diamonds or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow, I have to play that game.
I think it's. I mean, this will not surprise you, but I think it's very bad.
I bet. Dungeon Fight for New York is, at least I believe, earnestly good. And it doesn't try and make that kind of story reach. It's very centralized in New York. It feels like, if you're a fan of hip-hop movies, it feels like a hip-hop movie.
Yeah.
Like a hip-hop crime movie.
Well, and also, like, I'm just thinking about the time period when that came out, like GameCube era.
Yeah, it came out like 2003 or 4.
And that's really, like, fighting games weren't really doing... that's okay.
Sorry.
Fighting games weren't really doing, like, big story-based stuff at that time.
That's
and that's kind of like a recent addition to... like mostly the Mortal Kombat and Injustice games that are like, no, we can do a story and like we can make it an entertaining thing on its own.
Yeah, I remember at that time, fighting game wise, I was playing that, and I was playing, would it have been Soul Calibur 3 for the GameCube, like where you can play as Link in it?
Yeah,
I was playing. Those are the two fighting games. In Soul Calibur, they try to have a story, but it's really just like a screen of text and then a fight, and then a screen of text and then a fight. So it was cool to kind of see this evolution happen in real time.
That is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I also wonder if there's something very specific about that time where there would be this licensed game with all of these rappers in it, and that would be a cool and acceptable thing to do.
What do you mean?
Well, I just don't know if, like, with I don't know, our
Like licensing real people for a fighting game?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a weird thing.
well, and not just that, but the people who are allowing themselves to be licensed. Like, I'm
That
trying to
exist in modern culture. Is that the question?
I'm trying to think of current rappers who that would be like a cool thing to do.
Modern rap culture, particularly in the kind of our generation, is now becoming the people you hear on the radio. So it's all kind of like late 20-somethings and below. They all grew up on video games, and they all grew up on internet culture. So I think they would jump at the chance to be in a video game like this. I'm just not sure they would want to be in this kind of gritty and dark and tough on purpose kind of video game. I think.
And even then, like a fighting game
Yeah.
seems wrong too, right? That it was something a little bit more, I don't know, like accessible. Probably like a over-the-shoulder third-person competitive shooter or something
Which is
like that.
kind of what the 50 Cent games are, I think.
Yeah, except I think they're single-player experiences.
Yeah.
I might be wrong on that.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, that's a good weird game.
Thank you.
Let's see if any of us have a weird game that's even remotely as good as that one.
I look forward to it.
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say that part of what makes that game so much fun is it sounds like it was actually good.
It was so good.
Yeah, and like fun and playable. all of the weird games really that I experienced were garbage.
All right, well
Just
let's
absolute trash.
let's hear one.
All right, so it's probably the only unlicensed NES game that I ever played, and it's called Pesterminator, the Exterminator. It was a unlicensed NES game.
Can you explain what that means for a sec? Unlicensed?
So
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
the cartridge was not, because Nintendo like had all of the cartridges, and they made developers buy the cartridges so that they could print their game on it and then send that out with the Nintendo seal of approval.
But then at some point, a company like, what do you call that? Reverse engineered the like lockout chip, and so Atari had a subsidiary called Tengen who would release unlicensed carts, and then this other company did as well, and I don't know how it came into our possession.
Pest Terminator, the Exterminator.
So have you ever seen
Exterminator : The Exterminator?
Yes. And
A
okay,
little redundant.
have you
It
ever
seems very redundant.
have you ever seen
They should exterminate one of those titles.
He should be the Exterminator, the Pest Terminator.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, so it's a licensed game. I don't even know if it's licensed. It must be an advertisement of some sort for Western exterminators. This is the company that you see like
Oh.
like they drive around in trucks and they have they kind of look like 1920s
Is it like
like
the,
Mickey Mouse type
is the dude with,
cartoon.
like, a
A
hammer behind
mallet.
his back?
Yeah, he's holding
yeah,
a
yeah.
mallet, and there's like a little like rat pest that goes along
and
with
he's
him.
got like a big weird hat.
hat.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
looks like they're from like
It's a video game
1920
based on
cartoons.
that.
Yeah, it's an unlicensed Nintendo game based on that company. I don't know how it came into our possession. So basically, the way it worked was in each level of the game, you had to exterminate a certain number of pests. So like rats, bats,
Mhm.
bugs, things like that. And you'd be in like I think like the first level is like in a house or like a mansion basically. And so it's a platformer in that way. You'd hit the select button, it would pause, it would show you like you need to kill 44 more pests or something like that. It also had this weird like thing where kind of like the Animaniacs game for the SNES or what's that Big Planet where there's like 3 planes.
Sure.
Almost
and you
it'd
could,
be like
jump
planes,
back,
and
yeah.
you would.
Wow, that seems pretty advanced.
Well,
for-
I'm overstating it a little
Oh.
bit. It'd be like you're inside the house and you could move towards the camera or like away from the camera, but it doesn't have that big of a it doesn't affect gameplay that much because it's not a platformer in the sense like Mario where you're trying to make it from left to right. It's more like an arcade game where you're just on like one screen essentially that is a house. You can like go up steps and stuff like that, and you're just smashing bugs. It's not a lot of fun. But when you're a kid and and the games are just like given to you,
yeah.
you play what you have.
Yeah,
And
when you're a
so-
kid, there's not really like an understanding of there are other games that you go buy. It's just like
Yeah.
these are the games you play.
Or like good or bad games,
Yeah.
really. You're
Oh,
just
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of like
There was a Bugs Bunny game on Game Boy. It's called like Castle something, but it's like a terrible game, and you're just being chased by I think Sylvester the whole time. And like it's sort of a puzzle game and sort of a platforming game. This could count as one of those like weird games that I'm not even sure actually exists or if it's just imprinted on my memory. That like, and I played that game for hours and hours and hours, car trips, whatever. But like I am certain it's terrible. I'm certain it's bad, but I was a kid. I had no kind of gauge for what's good and what I should actually be spending my time on.
probably the most interesting thing about this game is those the notoriously bad game like Bible Adventure
Yeah, sure.
for like the NES or the same offshoot of this developer who they started making religious games, and I think they still exist in some form, but they did a Doom 3D clone where you're Noah, and so you're like so it's using the Doom engine, but they just like reskinned everything. So instead of Nazis, it's like angry sheep, and then instead of shooting them, you're throwing like fruit at them because you're trying to gather.
Oh, you're trying to gather the animals.
It's
That's
like the
incredible.
one unlicensed SNES cart that was ever released was that. So it's all the same like developer.
Here's
That's
the
incredible.
here's the thing. If there was like a real Noah video game where you like played as Noah and had to collect 2 of as many different kinds of animals before the floods come, that'd be an awesome
Yeah,
game.
it'd be kind of fun.
I think that'd be so
They
cool.
should have Darren Aronofsky should have had a tie-in. game
Yeah,
when the film came out.
Shoulda.
Can I tell a quick digressive anecdote about that film?
You have to now.
Have you either of you seen it?
I have not.
No.
Not very good. You don't need to. I saw it at the ArcLight Hollywood in Los Angeles, California, and there is a part in the film where God like is shouting at Noah and gets really angry, and at that exact time, an earthquake happened.
No.
So like the theater started to shake, and everyone in the audience looked around, and we all had the same thought of, is this part of the movie, or is this God punishing us, or is this? And then we all Googled it after, and it's just an earthquake. It was very good timing, though.
That
Which-
is really good timing.
And that still could be God punishing you.
It's true.
We're just like, oh, the earth shook. It was an earthquake.
Who did you play as in Pest Terminator? Were you the dude
you
with the
you
mallet?
yeah, the mallet guy. He has a name. I can't remember what it is.
Mario, I think is his name?
Mario,
Yeah.
yes.
Or Stanley.
Stanley, the Italian
well,
exterminator.
from Donkey Kong 3. Yeah.
Mhm.
Ah.
I'm not sure if he's Italian.
Yeah, I'm
We'll
not
have,
sure
to,
either.
we'll have to look into that. So the weird game that I brought for this is a Game Boy game that has Final Fantasy in its title. Final Fantasy Legend. Did either of y'all play this game?
No.
So it is sort of it retroactively is the first game in the Saga series. So like Saga Frontier, which was on the PlayStation 1, and which Project Octopath Traveler sort of is or sort of will be, where like the sort of stamps of this game are that you are multiple characters that have like different paths, and you can choose how to play your way through these games. But this is a Game Boy game, so it's like hyper limited in what you can actually do, and it looks like a Game Boy game. And so you start as a party of 4 characters, and you can choose your characters, and there are humans, there are mutants, and there are monsters. And the monsters are like monsters that you encounter in the game. The mutants are like X-Men style mutants. So they have like various powers, and the humans are like fighters and your basic Final Fantasy types. But the point of the game is to climb a tower that goes into heaven so you can kill God. That is
What?
that is the stated purpose of the game from the beginning. There is a tower in the center of your world that goes up into the sky, and your heroes climb it so they can kill God.
Why do they want to kill God?
Hey, Greg, I don't know. But so like there's this world map, and you're walking around on it, and it's a pretty small world map. And you accomplish everything that you need to, and then you start going up this tower, and you're like, yes, I'm on my way to fight God. But then like you reach sort of a dead end in the tower, and like you go out a door, you're 30 stories up or something, past the clouds, whatever. You step out, and there's like another world, like a separate world map 30 floors up, and then again 30 floors up, and again there are like all of these globes around, like if you're imagining this planet, right, that every time you get off there's like another world around it, and every single one has like every world has its own like big problem that you're like working to solve so that you can get access to the tower again and continue climbing and defeat God.
What do you mean by big problem?
So like each one has its own like global conflict, or
That's heavy.
yeah. So like everywhere you go, you just like saved a world, right? And then you go up some stairs, and here's another world that needs saving. And you go up some more stairs, and there's a separate world, and they all need saving. So maybe that's why you're hunting down God, is that he's got all these terrible worlds.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of, I mean, is it a commentary on the existential burden of the human race living in a world that's cruel and unfair? Is this like a fantasy of...
I mean,
Is
maybe
that too heavy for a Game Boy game called Final Fantasy?
and super early. There were 3 of these games on the Game Boy, and this was the only one that had that like tower and God killing conceit. But I mean, the game is just weird in so many other ways. The monsters, when you have them in your party, they can eat the meat of other monsters. So like, when you've got a monster in your party and you're fighting an enemy monster and it dies, maybe half the time it'll drop meat, and your monsters can eat the meat, and it causes them to randomly transform into a different monster.
Whoa.
Yeah. And like the game has crazy weapons, like it has machine guns and along with like swords and chainsaws. It's just like it's like a weird little fever dream of like what can we put in this game that ends up playing like the combat is like Pokemon basically. That you just see your opponents and then you use a menu to select what attacks you're going to use. But it's just like it's got all of this crazy stuff in it.
Yeah, if I'm thinking of the same game, it's like notoriously opaque.
Yes.
Like the monsters maybe can evolve, and so they learn new skills. But when they learn new skills, they forget like the old one, and it happens like randomly. I think so. Like they'll learn a new magic spell, but forget what they previously knew. So it might actually be a downgrade.
Yeah, the game also would let you save anywhere as long as you weren't in a fight. So you could, it's a Game Boy game. Let's consider it. But so you could really easily get yourself like trapped too far into a dungeon where like you're just going to die over and over again and be spit back to where you saved. I had a number of saves in this game that just like dead ended because like you'd save yourself in a corner and wouldn't be able to get out.
Did you ever beat this game?
Yeah, I killed God.
What happens when you kill God?
I don't remember. It was a very long time ago.
You're rewarded for it. You must be.
You must be. Or maybe
you become God.
That's probably it. You
Yeah.
probably become God.
It's like the Santa Claus.
That's correct. As we all know, Tim Allen murdered Santa Claus in the first scene.
But I think that game's especially weird because it has the Final Fantasy name on it.
Yeah, it's very weird.
And like, there are other Final Fantasy games where like you fight angels and stuff, but never God, to my memory.
The weirdest established franchise goes insane in one game example.
Oh,
There's also like
jeez.
Conker's Bad Fur Day and like Super Mario 2, you could say.
I think Conker is a really good example because like all of the other Rare games are, have that like bright, sunshiny, cheery, like English aesthetic. And then Conker is just like,
Yeah.
And he's hard drinking and hard swearing.
Yeah. A lot of like the Matrix jokes in it.
A lot of the Matrix jokes.
Yeah. Very strange.
Let's hear some other weird games. Greg, you got another one?
Sure, I could talk about a couple more.
Ooh.
I'll talk about one that I don't remember nearly as well as Def Jam Fight for New York, but I played it a bunch. It's a Nintendo 64 game called Milo's Astro Lanes. You guys heard of this?
Milo's Astro Lanes.
Yeah, it's a bowling game.
Okay.
It's a bowling game. When I was a kid, I was pretty into bowling. I was on a league. I got kind of good. So I really kind of gravitated toward this game. And I say gravitated, and that's a bit of a pun because this game takes place in space. Astro Lanes.
Is it like the lane itself is like out in space, or are you?
Yeah,
like...
you're kind of out in space, and now that I'm thinking about it, the lanes all kind of were floating in abstract purple space, and Milo was like a human, and there were other humanoid characters. I don't know how they breathed. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Maybe it's like the blue spot of the moon in the Marvel universe. Is it blue? Blue area? There's a part of the moon in the Marvel universe where Uatu the Watcher lives that is normal. People can breathe it. There's a like normal atmosphere. So maybe it's like that.
Yeah. Milo's Astro Lanes is part of the MCU.
That's right.
That is canon.
Mm-hmm. We're going to see that in one of the 5 or 6 post-credit sequences for
Black Panther?
Yep.
Yeah. I assume that'll be the
Wakanda
big
bowling alley. Yeah.
I assume that's the big lead-in for Infinity War. Is that they're all together,
for a bowling tournament.
all the Avengers are, and all the characters are on the moon bowling.
I would love that movie. I would go see that movie.
Then Thanos comes in, and he's like, "We had these reserved."
And then he kills Hawkeye.
Ooh.
So I'm trying to think of. There aren't many examples of like console bowling games, right?
None that I can think of. I can think of that arcade sort of bowling. Where
Yeah,
you
with the trackball.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was Nestor's Funky Bowling on the Virtual Boy.
Oh.
Yeah, based on the Nintendo Power character of Nestor. But
And then there was Wii Sports Bowling.
yes, a huge and famous one. Yeah.
Well, so how does Milo's Astro Bowling control? Or Astro Lanes?
Yeah.
Astro Lanes?
Milo's
Astro Lanes.
Colon, the Bowlernator is the full title.
How does it control? Like,
I'm trying to remember. I remember when you start at like the head of the lane. Is that what it's called? The head of the lane?
It is now.
There's a bunch of arrows. I'm changing titles all over the place. There were like a bunch of arrows leading from your character to the pins. And you could like adjust whether it hooks or goes straight. Maybe with like the C. Was that what they were called? The C.
Yeah,
buttons?
the C buttons, the yellow ones. Yeah. So almost like a golf game.
Yeah, almost like a golf game. And I think it was kind of like it would go up and you would press A and it would go back and you would press A. But each character had different stats of like whether they naturally hook, how much power they had. The most fun thing about Milo's Astro Lanes, though, is that there were tons of power-ups you could acquire. And those power-ups were kind of scattered randomly among the lanes. So there were certain instances where like you maybe only get 2 pins, but because it went down a certain path, you pick up the Mega Ball power-up or the Multiple Ball power-up, and then the next one you rain havoc.
Is Milo... Is that something like it, or did they make up this character for this game, or is it advertising some pest control company?
I believe it's an original universe, and it's kind of a fun universe.
Yeah.
It has a 50s rockabilly vibe. So like Milo has this kind of like retro pompadour, and the music is all kind of like swinging, bluesy guitar, swing sort of stuff. Milo's Astro Lanes is like written in kind of a 50s. So it's a weird mix of like 50s nostalgia with space stuff. And I'm kind of into it.
Yeah, that sounds super cool.
Yeah.
it's a little like Jetsons-y.
It's a little Jetsons-y. That's exactly right. But Milo, re-looking at the game cover, he looks so much like Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. But it's almost a little foul play, maybe?
Foul play.
I mean, because I'm imagining Milo as being like a CG creation, and when you were describing like the front like pompadour thing, immediately my brain went to Jimmy Neutron.
Strong Neutron vibes, yeah.
Strong Neutron vibes. Well, my second one is actually space focused as well. It's called Space Shuttle Project. It's like a flight for the NES. It was like a flight simulator. This is another one of those like I don't know where it came from, like grab bag games that we must have gone from a garage sale or something super cheap. And I looked it up. It has 6 levels to it, but I crashed every single time on the first level, so I was never able to get past it.
So it is like a flight sim?
So yes, but then it's also like has like some arcadey elements. So the first mission, because that's as far as I ever got, it begins with it's before launch, and you're an astronaut like outside of the space shuttle, and you are kind of like in a old school arcade platformer. You're riding an elevator up, and you have to flip a couple of switches.
I feel like I've played this game
before the time runs out, and then you have to go back down and pick up an astronaut, and he gets into the elevator and goes up and goes in.
Yeah.
That's the first part of it. Once you successfully accomplish that, then it launches, and the launch is all a bunch of, I guess, like quick time event type things. If you remember in BioShock 2, they changed the hacking to be one of those things where like or kind of like a golf game where the indicator is traveling from like left to right, and
So
you
just
have
need
to
stop it.
You have to like push A in like the right time, and then it would change to something else where there were like 2 arrows that were pointing at each other, and you had to make sure that they like lined up. And once you do that, then you're out into outer space. And the first mission, you have to release a satellite into orbit, and that's again kind of like a fairly standard like platforming controls type thing. And then once you successfully do that, you come back down to Earth.
There's so many parts.
And that's the those same QuickTime events. And then once you successfully do that, Then it cuts to a view of the space shuttle like landing like an airplane. And this is the part that I always crashed on. And watching a playthrough of it, it looks like it should just work like the rest of the QuickTime events, like it's two little arrows
You just
that you have to
line
like
them up.
line them up. For some reason, I could never do it. So always crashed on that one mission. So I never saw like when you have to save a cosmonaut and stuff like that.
That reminds me of the Top Gun game on NES, which is like a totally fun like flying combat game, but it's maybe somewhere in the first level. It's at whatever point in the game I never saw past. You have to refuel by meeting up with a ship that has like a thing that you have to like fly next to.
Yeah.
And it's like impossible. I mean, maybe someone was able to do it, but I never ever pulled it off.
I think
as a
Top
kid.
Gun is like notoriously difficult, but also with a lot of these games, especially NES games, if you got just the cartridge and never had like the complete box or especially the instruction manual, like
Yeah.
so much information was in the instruction manuals in those days. There were no like in-game tutorials that would be like, when this happens, do this. It would all just be in the instruction manual. There was no internet, so you would just have no idea what to do.
So you played just the one level of this game.
Over and over and over.
Yeah.
But I did, and always crashing at the end. But I did play it a bunch, yeah.
That's the phenomenon of like beating games is something I never got until I was kind of older. I feel like as a kid, there would always be some part where I was just like, I'll never beat this.
Yeah,
And
I'll
then
never
just
get past
always
this.
Start from the beginning again.
Yeah, and you're just like happy to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's crazy to think of like the number of times that we've played the various like first levels of games. Like I could play the first level of Battletoads in my sleep,
Yeah.
no problem. But you get to levels 9 and 10 and 11, and it's just Death City.
Well, it's also interesting when, I don't know if you guys have ever been like, oh yeah, this game I played as a kid that I never beat. Like for me, it was like A Boy and His Blob, the Rescue of Princess Blobette for the Game Boy.
Yeah.
And I played that game so much as a kid, always got stuck in the same place, had zero idea what to do. So at one point I was like, I'm gonna beat it. Like I'm just gonna get an emulator for my computer. I'm gonna figure it out. I'll like find a guide or whatever. And there's something very satisfying, but also weird about getting past the point that you got stuck as a kid, because you put so many hours into a game, and there's so much of it that you have never seen before. It's a weird feeling.
That's funny that you bring that up. I mentioned Battletoads because that is a game that I had that exact experience with. Like as a kid, really liked it. Thought the Battletoads were cool. I'm a big Ninja Turtle head, so like it was a natural, like the marketing trick that they were trying worked on Patrick. But the game was way too hard for me as a kid, and like I could get to like 6th or 7th level or something like that. And then in college, my buddy Al and I were like, let's get good at Battletoads. And we had one of the top loading NESs with the like dog bone controllers. And so like we spent maybe like an hour and a half every night for like a month playing Battletoads together. And we were like, it was our stated goal to beat it 2-player. The game physically impossible to beat with 2 people. When you get to level 11, which is it's one of those like running away from a thing, like you're on a weird vehicle. The second player controls stop working. So like the only thing that you can do is you can get to level 11 with 2 characters, and then one of them has to die, and then you can beat level 11 and then 12 after that. But yeah, so that was one where I was like, this is going to be super satisfying, and then it wasn't. Did you beat Boy and His Blob?
The Rescue of Princess Blobette?
Thank you for
I
finishing
did. I finally completed
Yay.
it. Found like, and once you realize what this, because if you've never played a Boy and His Blob game before, I guess I didn't play the modern remake that came out on like the Wii a few years ago, but the old school ones, you were a boy and you had a blob.
Good so
and
far.
you would feed the blob jelly beans, and different flavored jelly beans would transform the blob into like a ladder or an umbrella or a bunch of other stuff. And then you would use those to like solve puzzles and make your way through the game. I did end up beating it. and it was really annoying because it was one of those like Castlevania 2 solutions where you're like, how was I supposed to know that I'm supposed to like drop down there unless I created a hole or whatever, literally ever on every single block in the game. But yes, eventually beat it. Felt great.
So my final, or the last one that I've got here for weird game may not at first blush appear to be that weird of a game, but it is also a space game. So we're staying with the theme.
Yeah.
I'm referring to Super Star Wars, Super The Empire Strikes Back, and Super Return of the Jedi on the Super Nintendo.
Not only have I played this game, when I visited home for like Christmas stuff this year, my mom had found the instruction booklet of Return of the Jedi.
Amazing.
And it took me right back.
These
games are so fun and so weird.
I have played all 3 of those, have never beat any of them.
It's because they're so hard. And like the difficulty spikes on those things are crazy. In both The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi have early levels that are so hard. And like most of the game is side-scrolling platforming, right? And you're playing as all of your favorites. Like every level they give you a different like handful of characters to play as, but they all like control in ways that don't make sense. Like Chewbacca like jumps and flips around.
I remember that, yeah.
And like, you know, you're playing as Princess Leia in like the slave bikini, and she's got like a whip and she's like jumping around and kicking and stuff. And like, I don't know, it all feels very much like they knew that they were making a Star Wars game, or 3 of them, and they were like, what are video games? They're like platforming games where you like flip around and kick stuff, right? And then they all had these like vehicle sections between levels where it's this weird like mode 7 stuff where you're either like flying the speeder on Endor, and like basically any Star Wars vehicle you took control of at one point or another. But these games were just so like hard and obtuse. Like they were beautiful. They looked great, especially like for a Super Nintendo game.
Absolutely.
And the soundtracks are really good too. I mean, it's all just Star Wars music, but like those games were so weird. It's like they didn't stop to think about like, okay, what is Star Wars, and like what is a Star Wars game? They're just like, well, we have to make a game and it's Star Wars, so here it is.
Yeah. It's almost like they have sort of cookie cutter types of characters.
Yes.
We got some flippy animations. Put one character there. We got some whip animations. Put another character there.
They were all single player as well, right?
I believe so.
I believe so.
Which is it's a little bit weird because I feel like those were the kind of games that would have worked perfectly to just like you and your brother like each have a controller and you know are just plowing through as like, you know, Luke and Han. How much fun would that be?
Super Star Wars is one of those games where I played the first like 3 levels of that so often.
Mm-hmm.
Like the vehicle section that I remember most is I think it's the second level of the game, and you're in Luke's like land speeder or whatever those are called, going over the desert of Tatooine, and you have to like blow up banthas, like a certain number of banthas, and then you get to the Jawa's moving, whatever that's called. Oh man, those games are so hard.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the first game doesn't have a password feature, right? I think Empire and Jedi, you could like, you know, effectively save your progress by writing down the password.
Yeah.
But the first game didn't have that.
So you just had to bust through it.
So you just had to never see the end of it. Yeah.
That's one I wish was on the SNES Classic Edition.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to revisit it with like save states and stuff like that.
One of those games was re-released on, I think, PlayStation and Xbox when the first Battlefront game came out.
Like as a bonus feature?
I think just like because they were putting other like Star Wars games on like on those platforms. And I think it was Super The Empire Strikes Back, but it, you know, is the first time that the game was appearing on not Super Nintendo, which is pretty cool. But it's weird that it like goes to a non-Nintendo platform. Do we have any other weird games we want to talk about?
Yeah, I could talk briefly about one more game that I sort of thought about immediately.
Yeah.
It's another Nintendo 64 game, another fighting game. That's the pattern for me, I guess. I love fighting games. This game is called Fighter's Destiny.
Mm.
Fighter's Destiny. That's what the announcer would say. Do y'all remember it?
No, I've never heard of this game.
Who made this game? Do you know?
Boy, howdy.
Okay.
Could not tell you.
Fighter's Destiny.
Fighter's Destiny, it's not unlike like a Virtua Fighter or like a Soul Calibur with no weapons. It's like a 3D multiple plane fighter, like a Mortal Kombat 4 around the same era.
Yeah, sure.
And there are interesting, eccentric characters in Fighter's Destiny. The weirdest thing about it, though, is that there is a baffling and completely unknowable point system. It's kind of like fencing almost. You don't win just by beating up the other person until they're done, or even by like ringing out them like you can in Soul Calibur. Like throws get you a certain number of points, so you want to do a bunch of throws and hitting people in certain places. And so I had so many instances where I would do so many tutorials and I would feel like I have the point system down perfectly, and I would beat up the other person exactly right. I would diminish all of their health bar. KO. They have more points than you, they win. And I would just be furious.
Is there a cow in this game?
There is 1,000% a cow in this game. Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, there's an unlockable cow character. There's like a weird jester character.
Yeah, some kind of clown. And
The main character kind of looks like the Devil May Cry guy with like weird red hair.
yeah, Dante.
So is there like an overarching aesthetic, or is it just
There is kind of an overarching aesthetic. I would say, this is going to sound weird, Eurotrash Circus is the overarching aesthetic. It felt like a European game, and there was a lot of like every character represents a different culture, not unlike Street Fighter,
Right.
but it all has this kind of like heightened sense of humor about it, where like the French fighter is really French and the clown is really like feels like a classic commedia dell'arte clown. It was like a very esoteric, cerebral fighting game that I never understood, and I kept playing.
The developer is called Genki, and it was published by Imagineer, which I don't know what any of those companies
Yeah,
are.
me neither.
yeah?
The Wikipedia article notes that it takes the 3D fighting game standard set by Sega's Virtua Fighter,
Yeah,
which is also a weird game.
it is a weird game.
The weirdest thing I think about Virtua Fighter, apologies, is that as the games got like better, the graphics got better too, and then they reached a point where they're like, oh no, wait, we kind of like the simple polygon looks, and like went back. Like
Yeah.
later Virtua Fighter games look more like the first ones than like the kind of middle of the series.
I like that.
So did you enjoy Fighter's Destiny or?
Playing Fighter's Destiny, I did enjoy it, but I enjoyed it maybe in the way that you enjoy a workout, where like you go on an hour-long run, and by the end of it, you're like tired and sweaty, and you feel kind of sick, but you're like, no, it's good I did that.
Good. I did something today.
Yeah.
Someone asked me what I did today. I've got an answer.
So it's definitely not like a fun summer breeze playing Fighter's Destiny. It's like hard work.
Is it more fun or less fun than Clay Fighter 33 and a third?
Less fun.
Less fun
Clay
than Clay
Fighter
Fighter.
33 and a third is so fun.
What happened to that series?
Those games were so fun.
They were super fun.
They would clean up that kind of self-aware stuff. It would clean up.
Yeah,
Put
people would-
Deadpool in it. Forget about it.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Put it on the moon thing you were talking about. Forget
Yeah,
about it.
the possibly blue spot. I forget if that's what it's called.
Well, Greg, if your thing was fighting games, I guess mine was like crappy licensed games, because I played a game for the SNES called The Incredible Crash Test Dummies.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember when the Crash Test Dummies were like a thing?
Actual crash test dummies? Or the
Yeah.
band?
No, like the actual Crash Test Dummies.
And they were like toys for a while too, and there may have even been an animated series.
Yeah.
I remember maybe a PSA where they were alive or something like that.
I think
Yeah.
that was their origin.
Yeah.
Was they were in like a bunch of PSAs, like "Don't be a dummy."
And Lorenzo Music, the voice of Garfield, voiced one of them, I believe.
Oh really?
Fun fact.
So they were like the cavemen before cavemen.
Yes.
That they started off as like an
Uh-huh.
advertising tool and then became a vehicle for Nick Kroll.
Right.
That's right. The thing we all most know Nick Kroll.
That's right.
Well, and I think they existed before seatbelts were compulsory,
Oh.
right? So I think they're like the reason for their existence was to get people to buckle up, because
That was sort of the classic era of fear-mongering PSAs. There was like that, and this is your brain on drugs, and
Uh-huh.
all that good stuff.
yeah, and so this is just like another bad platformer that I never got that far in. I guess like the most interesting thing about it is aesthetically, you are of course playing as one of the crash test dummies. You
That's
don't play
kinda
as
fun.
both of them. And when you get hit, you lose limbs.
Amazing.
So
That's
it's like
fun.
you
That sounds
have
fun.
so you have a limited. I think you can hit like once or probably twice before you die. The first time you get hit, you like lose a leg, so you're hopping along on like one leg, and there's screwdrivers floating around in the world that as a collectible, and when you pick them up, your health regenerates. It has this whole story to it where like you're two crash test dummies, and this crash test dummy professor is worried that that one of his creations is going to figure out that he can like modify his brain to become an unstoppable killing machine. And then he does. And so your goal, and he like crashes a truck into the crash test facility, kidnaps the doctor,
poetic,
and then your
actually.
goal is to like track down, I think his name's like T9000, which I'm sure is some sort of play on the Terminator franchise.
That's the recurring theme. A lot of Terminators.
Terminators, yeah.
Yeah. It was the 90s. What were we going to do?
This game
It was inescapable.
Of
It
all the
sounds
games you've
great.
described, it
Yeah.
sounds like
So
the most
it's
fun.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it a great service by making it sound fun. It is not particularly fun or well designed. It was made or published by like LGN, that publisher that has like a rainbow logo. They make notoriously terrible NES and SNES games.
Did they make a Tiny Toons game?
Probably.
Okay.
The Tiny Toons game on NES was surprisingly good.
And so was the Super Nintendo one I played.
Also, the Game Boy one was good too.
Must have been someone else.
But there's like a lot of times where in that era, especially, licenses would go to a bunch of different
that's true.
publishers or developers, because it was, developers handling different platforms or different games. You'd have like the same license on the same license would go to different developers on the same platform, like all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was a weird time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. We've presented you with a bunch of good weird games. If you have a weird game that you would like us to mention, you should send us an email, Nintendo Cartridge Society
At gmail.com.
and we will talk about it. Because look, we've all played some weird games, and no one knew about this Pest Terminator: The Exterminator game. Genuinely, I'm very surprised and like shocked to hear that such a game existed.
We should watch video of it after this.
Yeah, we definitely will. Greg, thank you so much for
Yeah,
doing
thank
this.
you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. What an utter delight.
Is there anything you would like to plug?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at SmithLGreg. Instagram is the same handle at SmithLGreg. If you're a horror movie fan, watch the television program The Core. It's on the Shudder Network, which is a streaming service for horror heads. It's a cool talk show, comedic look at horror films with some of your favorite horror filmmakers. And I'm performing comedy a bunch at the UCB Theater in Los Angeles. Go there.
Yeah, go there. Greg will be there, and he'll make you laugh.
Aw.
Greg, again, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and all those places where you get your podcasts. We appreciate it. If you would like to follow us on Twitter, I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell. Collectively, we are at NinCart Society. The Facebook page is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. If you like Mark and Mine's opinions, you can check out our comic book reviews and discussions on retconpunch.com. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thanks for listening.
Campfire.